Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you so kindly for joining us. Welcome to Green Apple Books on the Park. My name is Todd Johnson. I'm the event coordinator here for Green Apple. And tonight I'm delighted that we are joined by Austen Leah to celebrate her new collection, Once This Forest Belonged to a Storm. Let's give a hand for Austen. And Austen is joined by Catherine Pond and Muriel Leung. We can give a hand for them as well. Unfortunately, Amanda Gunn is not able to join us this evening, but we are sending all of the good healing vibes out to Amanda. And Amanda, if you're watching, we are thinking of you now, and we'll see you next time. We do still have her book available for purchase, and it's not out yet. So if you want like a sneak peek of a new poetry collection that's not out yet, we're your guys. We can do that for you. Thank you for joining us both in person and online this evening. We are broadcasting from San Francisco. We are on Ramaytush Ohlone land, and we hope you join us in our pledge to turn land acknowledgement into land action every time you hear a land acknowledgement, by either donating your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization every time you hear, or in my case, speak a land acknowledgement. I have very brief business before we get to the fun part of the evening. First, now is a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. We have a full calendar of events on our website I would encourage you to check out. We have a really great season ahead, including the event that you're attending this evening. But bear with me as I give you a little bit of a sneak peek of a couple of things we have coming up. On Wednesday, I'm very excited that we're going to be hosting Nana Kwame Adjei for his novel Chain Gang All-Stars. He's going to be in conversation with Tommy Orange, and that is going to be at the chapel in the Mission District. I'm very excited that we're hosting a literary event at a rock venue, so I would love to see you folks there. And then on May 24th, we are hosting poet Kimberly Reyes with Desiree Alvarez and Jennifer Hasegawa, alongside yours truly. I get to be an interlocutor for the evening. I'm very excited about it. And Kimberly is a dear friend of mine, as well as a very talented poet, and all three of those authors are from Omnidon, so it's kind of an Omnidon takeover that night. I look forward to seeing you folks there as well. Thank you for buying books from tonight's authors, if you have already, or if you are considering it. If you've been here before, you've heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you also support the writers who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, which, if you ask politely, they might sign. So it might be the best part. We always appreciate it if you're able. Thank you so kindly. We're just going to hear some reading from each of these three poets this evening, and then we can socialize afterward and look around the bookstore, and it'll be a nice little lunch for Austen here in the Bay Area. I'm very excited. So I'll introduce our first reader. Catherine Pond is the author of Fieldgrass, winner of the Crab Orchard First Book Prize, and a finalist for the National Poetry Series. Her poems have appeared in Best New Poets, Best American Non-Required Reading, Narrative, and many other publications. Pond is a PhD candidate in literature and creative writing at the University of Southern California, where she teaches writing. With Julia Anna Morrison, she's the co-founder and co-editor of Two Peach, which has been operating since 2015. Let's give a hand for Catherine Pond.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming to support Austen's beautiful book. I'm so excited to see this book in the world. I've been so lucky to be friends with Austen for almost a decade or more. I don't know, we're getting old. And anyway, it's just, I've been lucky enough to see some of these poems in early iterations. Seeing them in a whole collection together is like heartbreaking in the best way, like in the most beautiful way. So I've just read through it cover to cover so many times now, and I hope you'll buy it and read it too, over and over. Congratulations, Austen. Thank you for having me here. So I thought I'd read 6 poems, and 3 will be from my book, and then I'll read 3 new ones. And in some ways, they're all in my mind linked to Austen. I'm not sure how, but, well, you'll see the last 3, they're very California. I'm from the East Coast, and Austen's from the West Coast, and when we met in New York, I felt like, to me, she really was the epitome of, like, gorgeous California in her work and in her person. So when I did end up moving to California, she made it seem like a normal thing to do. Okay, this is called Forest Horse. He was gone by then, gone with girlhood, like an apparition, until one night outside Woodstock, I heard shuffling in the branches outside the kitchen window and saw the glowing body, silver with time, emerge from behind a lone pine. I walked out the back door. Cold air lifted my hair. We were so close we almost touched. I was waiting for him to remember who I was, to remember why he resented me. Instead, there was fear in his eyes. I could tell he had been out there a long time. He moved closer, his breath turning to steam. I reached out and touched his cheek. Like a child, he heaved against me, and I held him. In the silence, there was a sick sister, a crumpled house. I couldn't. I thought about the long years between our last visit. I wanted to explain how lonely I had been, how loneliness had made me mean, unreliable, had driven me deeper in. Even now, being with him meant abandoning my family, who were gathering inside the house, waiting to serve dinner, wondering where I was. I knew he might never appear again, or only after a long snow in the middle of the night, and that I would love him forever, not in spite of the way he stayed gone for so long, but because of it. The semester just ended for a lot of us who teach writing, and this is like a love letter to my students, and I kind of make fun of them in the poem, but I'm also making fun of myself because I was a student, and I did this over and over. Okay. August in the Adirondacks. Walking to the cemetery this morning, rain, and a tea kettle and spoon for the bear if he came back, but I knew he wouldn't. I drank coffee, made myself anxious, swam out into the lake. Still, I can't get the glass out of my head. You lodged there. After the end of each semester, Lowell checked himself into McLean for observation. Demise of the routine, resembling demise of the self. Dried up feathers, dumb nest you built your life around. I miss my students in summer, their sloppy, elaborate sex scenes. Poems that have nothing to do with the erotic, but with proving to an audience that someone loves them. Someone with a body to make them complete. And I give them all an A, because why not? They're in for worse surprises. And should there be a confession in the hallway, should there be tears, I will not tell. The syntax could use a little work, I will offer, but the love seemed real. Okay, I'll just read the 3 new ones, and then we'll turn it over. I'm also so pleased to be reading with Muriel tonight. She and I are in the program at USC together, or we were. She graduated and she's a doctor now, which is huge. So I'm honored also to be reading with you. This poem is called Inverness, California, and I think I first heard about Inverness from Austen, who told me to go there. And the last poem I'll read is called Or Hot Springs, which is also a place Austen told me to go. So I'm just following her poetic constellation and hoping it rubs off on me. Inverness. I am the rain's frustrated logic. I am too fragile to leave. What wouldn't I do for the dulcimer's hammer to come down hard on me, to tease a tune from the fret? I can turn from solid to liquid so fast. Lying next to you, fingers intertwined, warm breath of your chest rising and falling, I am being swallowed by something you can't see. Red flowers, a disease. I feel the stark edge of the meadow dropping to the sea. Stars like a string orchestra curtained off by fog. Their soft spindles, their masculine streak. The splash they make in space. Poets know sorrow only gets you so far. Beauty is anything left, open to interpretation. What more could I ask for? For now, I press my cheek to your cheek. This is called Tool Elk, and it's about a visitation from an elk. I don't know if you guys have been to Point Reyes. If you hold still long enough for me to look at you, I whisper, I will hold still long enough for you to look at me. Rain gathers on your glossy coat. Your mane swirls out at the sides, then thickens to a point over your heart, like an upturned fleur-de-lis. You appeared out of the fog, a crown of antlers piercing the path in front of me, silver tines scalloping the air. Now you eye me silently. I'm at the age where I must be myself or else. You seem to understand, leaving room on the path for me to pass. You are not a dream thick with gold. You go so gently, I wonder if you've seen me at all. But then, on the outcrop of the rock meadow, in a vanish of wildflowers and rain, you turn and look right at me. It's a look that lasts years. I could run to you, throw my arms around you. But I will wait. I drive home alone under stars I can't see, their silver dripping through me, my tires whirring as the rain keeps singing, quietly, in your honor. This is called Or Hot Springs. We don't stay long in the baths. It's a clothing optional bathhouse. We don't stay long in the baths. The air turns cold after dark and we cook in the communal kitchen. Back in the cabin, we lie side by side, staring through the oculus at a spread of stars, Cassiopeia, Andromeda. In the morning, sun falls like fire around us as we move down the long dirt road towards where we think the river will be. The pines deepen from green to gray. Fire has left its fingerprints everywhere. I'm scared of what I love, but we don't have to be another natural disaster. I see the world through one lens, you through another. When we stack the two pieces of glass, one on top of the other, the world grows smaller and more manageable. Will we ever find the river, I wonder? My jeans are stuck to my legs with sweat, bunched up around the crotch. And then there it is, a silver rope slicing the burnt ground in two. All summer, lions have been coming down from the mountain looking for water. I imagine one watching us now from behind the peach-colored brush as we take off our clothes. How endless you are, like a memory, moving beside me. Thank you.
One more hand for Catherine Pond, please. Thank you for taking us on a tour of some beloved places in California. I appreciate it. I'm delighted to introduce our next reader, Muriel Leung, who's the author of Imagine Us, The Swarm, and Bone Confetti, which is the winner of the 2015 Melanie Press Book Award. She is a recipient of fellowships at Kundiman, Bona Voices Workshop, and the Community of Writers. She's the poetry co-editor of Apogee Journal. She also co-hosts the Blood Jet Writing Hour podcast with Rochelle Cruz and MT Vallarta, a Dornsife Fellow in Creative Writing and Literature at the University of Southern California. She is from Queens, New York. Let's give a hand for Muriel Leung.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming here in celebration of Austen's beautiful new book. Had the pleasure of knowing Austen during our time in a manuscript workshop with David St. John. And it's been really incredible to see how fortunate it is to see a work in progress kind of unfold and then become something that's real and tangible in your hand. And I'm so delighted to know that even in the course of knowing you in the workshop, I could feel the book coming into fruition. To see it here right now in front of me is just such a delight. So congratulations, Austen. You really deserve this. And I'm happy to celebrate here with you. I'll just be reading a couple of poems from the last section of my book, Imagine Us, The Swarm. The last section of the book has a series of poems that all begin with the word suppose. And I love the word suppose. I think it's a way of sort of reimagining what's possible. Here we go. Suppose the sky is flushed with change and it is possible the dead and the half-alive clamoring over the stuttering movements of speech. The wheels of our perpetual organs keep on spinning in defiance of death's persistent volume. Supposing it is true that when my mouth presses against the light, there is a soft black bloom. God has no dominion over blackness. In nature, where every color schools, I have been kissing a velvet moon. The light bounces off the chrysalis of night morning, revealing an amorphous sheen. If my father is not a ghost, and my mother is not a ghost, then I too, a maker, a shape shifter. Bless this underlayer of sky and its many faces. The rain is not a light poison. There is no recourse for the things we have done to one another when we were hurting. I suppose myself into a whirl. When she awakes up from the solemn years, she will turn to him and say, "Hello, the not me." He too will wake to declare, "Hello, my courage." Suppose my father awoke, and the corners of the blue room beamed forth with a new aliveness. In my hands, his legs grew full and supple as an apple. He touched his toes to the ground, surprised by his sudden quickness, the cancerous wound, a patched-up hole in the ground. Around his bed he ran several laps, then leapt once towards the ceiling, the lightning coursing through him. Never mind the coldness of the floor's linoleum. He skidded down the hall in bare feet, buckling with laughter over the pancreatic humor of his life. Ha, 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 rattled the hospital metal, fleeing their tray. Through every corridor, doctors and nurses clapped their hands and touched the wing of his back. He pelted through each floor so fast he rose from the ground, suspended in midair. The fluorescent lights glowed pink as the inside of a nail. As my father made the next furious turn, I thought, please don't pedal forward without me. The gap in his hospital gown exposed a tiny sliver of a star of which I held on. Every room in his body flooded with the aquatic luminance of night. When I was born, we spoke often of flight. He touched my mother's stomach, and within her I felt my own cord. Thus we began the circuitry of love and tumorous ache. He could hurt us there and there. I watched the angels of his violence rise from him like a tuft of yellow smoke, and there it went, and with apology, he would live for 40 more years. Suppose I got into the car with my mother and we just drove. The day that she left, the air filled with a prickling sound. In the car's silver interior, we were pulled by streetlights and the debris of night. It became possible to drink one another's pains. Then dawn arrived. We had crossed 2 state lines, waving to their soft tracks in the air. At a road-stop diner, we ate little and talked about our disappointments. Had it not been for the kindness of apples, then what? My great-grandmother filling the hunger of my mother before me, my palm opening to receive. The family women, 3 generations deep, sat watchfully in the corner booth, their mouths a pile of salt. It was not that she regretted the quality of our births, my mother said, but what would it be like to be chosen first and only? I begged her to return, I begged. There are animals who study grief for years. Did you know that, Mom? I said. It was possible she heard me and chose instead to contemplate the sugar spilled across the counter. Each granular speck, a pattern loss. I wet it with my thumb. How could we not see it? Our mouths brimming with action and consequence. My father's heart turned away from us, dreaming into another future of glass. I share my mother's face, after all. The music repeats. Just 1 more hour, she said. She took my hand. With the women, our pockets lined with sugar, we left. Suppose it is easy to believe. Each sparrow landing leaves a fossilized mark, the hard air pushing against its wings, having shape, texture, and fold. Easy to swallow what we cannot see, but the barriers of flesh cannot hold. The coarseness of evidence, the fabric of my hide, there would be no question of feathers, their lightness accruing iron, no animal testifying to the grave. When I bleed, the farce rushes to bind the body red to me. Easy to make amends out of water. The fish leap from the foam, and this can be a victory too. Though I once placed too much faith in brute and ardor, it is softness that touches me. Even in the absence of love, I kneel before the altar of its loss, my belief lit by candle alone. I have this belief in the afterlife of many tender objects, the persistence of their kin. Believe that though the truth pockets holes, I peer through blinds, and the kite of it is waiting there with tri-colored bells. There is proof enough for you and me. There would never be any need for proof again. When I say I believe you, I mean this: the kite, the color, the clarity of bells. And this will be the last one. Suppose every body I ever loved made up a tiny universe in which each one thrived in their own planetary hues. I mistook each one for the central star, common mistake. And still I draped each of them in the garments of changing seasons. How many moons? I asked. They answered, and I supplied. The universe moved in strident form, each planet missing the other in orbit. I did not intend to collapse the blue planet, still unfurling in its newness, but the layers of its life saw no future for water. I abandoned a dry well. I floundered. Years ago, the universe held a pale sun. It struck a match through every star-kissed body, and in its stillness was painful as glass. I thought falling in love meant white hot, but that was only a fraction of the universe, of time. I felt the shadow first when I pleaded, eclipse me. It was the chaos of spurs, and it burned. It came and went, and in returning, begged the spun miracle of rings. There would be no end to this carrying. For them, I knew I would always wait. Turning my body over, I saw the universe was halved, its noisy assemblage sliding towards collision. I held the planets close. I pressed their gaseous swarms to ruckus mass. I did this so they would believe me. Having endured the labor of the current, the universe was fast expanding. It needed to fold. Even I could not bear it. I surrendered, and I loved them all. Thank you so much.
We have one more hand for Muriel Leung, please. Forever I'm delighted to introduce the reason for the season, the poet who brings us together here tonight. Austen Leah Rose is a Los Angeles-based poet, the recipient of the 2018 Walter Sullivan Award from the Sewanee Review. Rose holds an MFA from Columbia University and is completing a PhD in creative writing and literature at the University of Southern California, where she was the recipient of the 2020 Maddox Brown Award for Contemporary Poetry. Her work has appeared in Agni, the Iowa Review, Narrative, Ziziva, and Southern Review, among other outlets. Her collection, Once This Forest Belonged to a Storm, is the reason we are here tonight. So let's give a hand for Austen Leah Rose.
Thank you so much, Car, for hosting this. Thank you, Green Apple. It's so much fun to be here and to see you guys. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you, Muriel and Catherine, for reading. It feels very special to be reading with both of you, not only because I think both of you are brilliant writers, but also because you've seen this book in very raw, former versions of itself. And you're two of the most brilliant readers that I've ever met. So thank you. This book wouldn't be what it is without both of you. I'm going to start today by reading a poem by a friend of mine. She was the first friend I ever had who was a poet. Her name was Courtney Campa, and she died this past year, tragically. I met her at Columbia, and she was very, very, very talented and pretty much everything that she turned in for workshop didn't need any edits. It just came out of her the way that it ended up on the page. So this is her book is called Our Lady of Not Asking Why, and I'm going to read one of my favorite poems just to start. This poem is called Fifth Joyful Mystery. At Union Station, a woman has lost her child in the crowd. The concourse is flooded, choked with hair, and she is drowned. She is drowning. She is about to drown. Her son's brief body, his fleshy wrist, his leash cast off, the ringing in her finger bones, having made of devotion a kind of cruelty. The security guard holds a small red sweater, as though at once immaculate and in flames. The train to Philadelphia calls, and no one hears. She is a volume specific to the pitch of speechlessness. She is running as if free, meaning also very much alone. Who took her child? Who would want her child? Aren't children terrifying? She thinks so, turning wildly in circles as if chased. The camera phones are out and aimed. What she is doing now is what the moon does when it is held down underwater, by which I mean something we haven't the words for. So that's Courtney Campa, and this is her book, Our Lady of Not Asking Why. And now I'm going to turn to my book that just recently came out. I guess this book is sort of, I guess you could say part of this book is about emerging out of childhood and the mythology of childhood that we carry with us. I think you could interpret the storm in the title as the storm of childhood. So I'm going to read poems from the book somewhat chronologically, and we'll start in childhood. And you guys can hear me, right? Okay. So this is the first poem from the book, and it's called Nocturne. At night, the windows in our house become mirrors, as if to say, what happens here will keep on happening. I press my face to the glass and see black trees, black sky, the moon like a pocket turned inside out. Below, I hear a howl, which means our mother is dreaming with her eyes open again. I don't go downstairs after dark, but sometimes I talk to God from my bedroom. His voice sounds like pink and blue buds opening inside of me, like singing bruises. This next poem that I'm going to read is a sister poem. There are a lot of sister poems in the book. Sisterhood is a big theme. My sister and I are very close, and we have these long conversations on the phone pretty frequently with each other, where we're sort of figuring out how to live in the world, how to be what we think. And I've started to think of them sort of as Socratic dialogues that we have with each other on the phone. They can last for hours. So I was trying to capture something in this poem of the essence of these conversations. This poem is called The Undrowned World. For 14 years, my sister and I sailed down a river. She was starboard. I was port. Together, a complete cosmology. We sailed through meadows of buckwheat and yarrow. We sailed through valleys of fog. Sometimes I went mad, and my sister transcribed my gibberish with both hands on a piece of willow bark before sending it away in an osprey's beak. Sometimes I braided fish bones into her dark hair. We were trying to establish a point of view, the way water establishes itself at the base of a waterfall. At night I slept and she watched the stars, or I watched the stars and she slept, or we both watched the stars and neither of us slept, or the night was cloudy and there were no stars. I said, moonlight is a form of radical empathy. And she said, distance is the color blue. And I said, watching an airplane take off is the best cure for depression. God is a mountain in translation, she said, and I thought about this for a few days, ultimately nodding in agreement. At one point, she had a son, and, like a butterfly, he was born with the memories of our forgotten childhood. When she said sister, I said, my body like a boulder against your bright pain. When she said love, I said a type of photograph. It went on like this for hours. I know that I know nothing, the river said. Every morning we watched the sunrise over the undrowned world. Every morning we reinvented the river. Okay, this next poem, the title is Ein Sof, which is a term that comes from Kabbalah, and it means basically, or the way that I understand it, is Ein Sof is sort of God before God created the world, so God in infinite nothingness. Ein Sof. Behind our synagogue, there is a room where people gather after services to eat and talk. But sometimes I go in there alone, while everyone is still in their seats praying. The room is large and dark, with a wood floor and stacked chairs, and an opening in the middle of the ceiling that lets in light, like the back of an eye, a place of prayer behind a place of prayer. I am trying to teach myself forgiveness. I am trying to remember that God is cruel because God is lonely, and aren't we all? Outside, the day is a confusion of clouds, and people are saying things that they don't really mean. I did not know there was another sky behind this sky, bigger than I could ever have imagined, and full of stars. So this next poem I wasn't planning on reading, but something about being in San Francisco, I think. I lived here in my, I guess, late 20s, mid or late 20s, and I wrote this poem even earlier than that, actually. This poem is over a decade old, but I feel like it captures something of the time of being in my 20s, actually early 20s. I think I wrote this when I was 22. This poem is called A Difficult Situation. I was walking down the street when my father called. It was almost completely dark. The snow was lit as if plugged in. I told him that my hypothalamus was overactive, but some days carry their own weight. My voice rubbed off on the phone like ink. When I got home, I wanted my stomach to harden to crystal. I wanted to feel the raw pit of it, so I invited this boy over. He sat on my couch. I took off my skin and put it next to his. Kafka says it's easier to see yourself from outside your burrow. I put on a Bessie Smith album. The boy looked at me, and I looked at the record player, and my body grew in two directions, like a tree. I am often shocked to look in the mirror and see a beautiful woman. I am frightened by enlightenment. I don't want to forget what unknowing is like. So yeah, it's kind of painful to read a poem that's so old, because it's a little bit embarrassing, but it made its way into this book. This next poem is a poem that, it was one of the first poems I wrote when I first moved back to LA. I'm from LA, but I moved back there to attend the USC program with Muriel and Catherine. And I was really worried that I wouldn't be able to write in LA, partially because I'm from LA, and then also because walking was so much part of my writing process, and I walked so much in San Francisco that I thought I wouldn't be able to write. And then I wrote this poem, which is a driving poem. And I thought everything's going to be okay. This poem is called In Defense of Daytime. And there's two poems. There's a poem in this book called Against Daytime, and then a poem called In Defense of Daytime. And I just thought that was so funny, but it's probably not funny. This is In Defense of Daytime. I told my husband I was going out. I didn't say where. The car was parked under a tree in a halo of dust and leaves. Above, birds. I put the key in the ignition. I liked the car. I liked how contained it was. I liked that it had its own temperature, its own code of conduct. Buckle your seatbelt. Adjust the mirrors. The car makes the world look like lava. Slow moving, rising up to meet you and then falling back into the earth. I was out in the afternoon, but I had the feeling of being behind the afternoon, like an underground aquifer, something I'd tapped into which represented the flip side of things. Like when light comes into the room at a slant, and you realize the person you're talking to is lying. Like that. Everything released from the prison of its preconception. I drove to a shop that sold soaps. I walked down the street. The day had stilled, the way tears gather in a person's eyes but do not fall. I got to thinking about water. I have a friend who laughs whenever she's in water. There's something you should know about me, she said. I always laugh when I'm in water. I got to thinking about unconditional love. Unconditional is another way of saying no questions asked. And when I can't ask questions, I get angry. Last week, I slammed a door in my husband's face. "You're just like your father," my husband said. There were people drinking wine on the street. There was a breeze coming in from the west. Maybe I was in a foreign country. Maybe I was in Greece. Maybe I'd been traveling for months on a journey to find myself. Maybe I had my own apartment with a window that opens onto the ocean where the light pours onto my face each morning, like in a Renaissance painting in which a woman is silently reading a letter. It was still afternoon. I wasn't in a hurry. The other night I dreamt I was in an airplane and the engine stopped, but the airplane floated safely down to earth and landed on an island. It was a dream that could have been bad but ended up good. That was the point. I drove to the lake. The lake was surrounded by a chain-link fence. Through the fence I could see mountains. I had recently read about a composer who could only write 1 minute of music or an opera, nothing in between. The sky was pink and blue, and the palm trees were black, and the lights coming on in the houses were like the sound of broken glass. In the park, someone had planted native California plants, which calmed my anxiety. It was the feeling of everything being in its proper place. On the drive home, a full moon rose in the sky's throat, like an unholy thought, preventing the earth from speaking. My friend Catherine here is my friend who laughs whenever she's in the water. It's a little fun fact about that poem. And also, apparently, I write a lot of poems with soap in them. That's something I think, Catherine, you pointed that out to me.
We love soap.
Okay, now we're getting into kind of the center of the book where there's a series of love poems. And this poem, which is called Love Poem, I wrote during the pandemic when my husband and I were living in Eugene, Oregon, on the edge of a forest, and I didn't have any friends there, and I felt incredibly lonely. And so to pass the time, I kind of would create these narratives in my head where I would imagine that Will, my husband over there, had fallen out of love with me, and I would get really sad. And then he would do something really normal, like say, "You want to go on a walk?" And then I'd realize, actually, he did love me. And I guess what it made me realize how much faith is required to be in love with someone. You kind of can never know if they truly love you. You just have to take their word for it. Anyway, that's a long backstory, and this poem really has nothing to do with any of that. It's called Love Poem. In the dream, I joined a band of hedonists who feasted on cocoa bon and double chocolate cake and romped around the countryside breaking things. Exhausted, I lay down in the dirt, shoulder blades separated by a slab of granite, the razor's edge of desire and repulsion, when suddenly a mathematician started explaining imaginary numbers as an invisible bridge required to get from one rational concept to another, adding that love requires absurd faith bordering on delusion, then wanted to show me the results of a science experiment, proving willful ignorance was contagious by isolating the brain chemical that women produce after giving birth. We were standing on an ocean cliff, the tide pulled back by the moon's magnetism to reveal a row of crustaceans like teeth, when I realized this whole time you had been living a secret life as a rhododendron in a lush garden, and I received a letter from you saying you'd gotten terribly tangled up with the radishes and onions, blossoming in places you didn't know you could blossom. But not to worry, you still loved me. And when I looked at the sky, my Cassiopeia was the mirror image of your Cassiopeia, by which I mean, in the dream, I could see two versions of the same story at once, which made me cry. And you said, "This is why we have to read books, because of the natural absorbency of paper." And I said, "This is why music is so dangerous." And I'll read another love poem that's a bit more straightforward. This one's called Dear Husband. Dear husband, ever since you told me how you wanted to be touched 3 nights ago, we have not touched. We float in and out of rooms. We each find our own patch of polished sunlight and sit in it while we listen to the first 8 chords of Beethoven's Symphony No. 5 in C minor, which is the sound of not knowing what comes next. I have been dreaming of a world in which dreams are forbidden. I have been dreaming in black and white like in a war when there is only sorrow or joy and the world lacks gradient. I have learned 2 facts about the moon which contradict each other, then opened our bedroom window to stare into its blank face. Yesterday, I saw wisteria blooming by a concrete bridge, its purple petals clanging in the dry air, and I thought about a portrait of a sleeping woman we once saw, minutes before the museum closed. I remember when we first met. I told you time had broken into a series of still photographs. What is it about love that makes it feel impossible to feel continuously? Dear husband, sometimes I see eternity in the blind drone of noon. Today I stepped out of the shower, wrapped myself in a white towel, and sat on the balcony to let the sunlight dry my wet hair. I wanted to feel the intimacy of 2 elements interacting. I wanted to tell you why I loved you, but I could only point at a tree. And, okay. This next poem I wrote while I was in a Shakespeare class and reading a lot of Shakespeare and feeling like I was having this very intimate encounter with Shakespeare. Like I really knew him as a person. I was the first person to ever really understand him. And so I wrote this poem. But I think the Shakespeare figure kind of combined with Mark Strand, who is a poet that I worked with and was a mentor to me and to whom this book is partially dedicated. This poem's Meeting Shakespeare. I met Shakespeare in a hotel room downtown. There was a lamp on by the bed and the radio was playing. Shakespeare was wearing a gold watch and a velvet sash. It was clear he had a taste for beautiful things. He sat in a chair and let me talk, and I told him about television and strip malls, how I have the same blue eyes as my mother. Why do we inherit what hurts us? I asked, but he didn't answer. I went to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror. I imagined what it would be like to be a woman living 400 years in the future who was imagining what it would be like to be a woman living 400 years in the past. I washed my hands. I re-entered the room. Outside, the night was a bucket with a hole in the bottom. The darkness kept spilling out. Shakespeare, I said. Sometimes when I'm sad, I don't feel anything at all. He put his hand on my shoulder. He was a tactful man. Very good, he said, and was gone. So now I'm going to read my last poem. Thank you all so much for coming out on a Monday night. This is the sweetest San Francisco book launch I can imagine. Thank you. This last poem is called Dedication. What child doesn't love to learn that you can strip back the bark on a seemingly dead plant to find it still green on the inside, still living? I don't know how to write. I only know how to strip back bark to see if I'm still green on the inside. The people in my group therapy say I should try referring to myself by nicer nicknames. Little morning glory, little sleepy eyes, little turnip, little potato pancake. I am doing this one day when suddenly here comes William, most literal adversary of my aloneness. After we fought, I drove east and hiked 5 miles into a forest. I love the forest because I could never write a book about it. Once upon a time, there was a forest. Then nothing happens until a breeze blows through chapter 2. A few hundred pages of roots absorbing nutrients from dense soil. In the forest, I play a game with myself. It's called direct communication with my heart. No stethoscope required. Did you know certain insects can see infrared light? Worms may have a truer understanding of the universe because their brains are less complex and therefore engage in less editing and projection than ours do. Most arachnids have 6 or 8 eyes. 6 is a good number of times to read a poem. It's the number of sides a snowflake has and the number of points on a Jewish star. The Hasidim say that you should treat every object you encounter with holiness. I wish I'd known this earlier. Oh, holy toothbrush, oh, holy glass of water which William placed on the bedside table while I was reading Dostoevsky. Oh, William's index finger which he uses to hold a pencil when he draws a portrait of me, galaxies where my eyes should be. William, when you married me, you discovered my collection of broken electronics, a broken record player, a carton of scratched CDs. A dowry of brokenness. You're welcome. My greatest fear was, and still is, that you'll think my poems are too sincere, that you'll leave me for someone who doesn't think about the Holocaust after having sex like I do, but does know the meanings of all your favorite Yiddishisms. You can't empty the ocean with a spoon. If you don't open your mouth, a fly won't get in. When a thief kisses you, count your teeth. Being with you is like listening to birdsong, is a proverb I just made up, which means your presence is the articulation of varying degrees of distance. And also, this poem is dedicated to you. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Oh, can we give Austen Leah Rose one more hand? This is an exceptional collection. I'm really glad that you got to celebrate it with us and brought us together here to do so. We give another hand for Austen and Catherine and Muriel. Thank you all so much. I so appreciate you, and I appreciate all of you joining us this evening. We have books from all of our authors available at the front. You can find them there. They're not back here, they're at the front. And you can come up here to have them signed and take a look around. Oh, please finish any open wine bottles that we have. I can't use them again, so that's your homework. And take a look around. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.